Hello, this is Todd Luck, and the Kickstarter for Schism unfortunately did not make it. It didn't reach its goal in the time allotted, and so nobody's money was taken. But the good news is it has restarted, and so if you pledged the first time, you're going to need to submit your pledge again. It does have a new campaign page with a new URL. The name is still mostly the same, Schism, Be Careful What You Dream, but now it has Redux at the end of it. It's the campaign that's active right now, and it runs through May 11th. And so when you pledge, you can still get the 4-issue miniseries, or you can get the hardcover collection, and you can get as many copies as you want to. But in the first campaign, those were the only things you could get. So unlike other campaigns I've covered, this is not being done by a comic professional or a Kickstarter veteran. This is a first-time Kickstarter by a fan. But lessons were learned and suggestions that were given by backers were taken into consideration. And this time we do have some add-ons, including both black and white and color lithographs of the first cover of Dark Dominion, along with the actual original interior artwork for the Dark Dominion series done by Joe James. This is your chance to actually get the original comic book pages from that series. So I've already done a video giving an overview of what Schism is, so I recommend checking that out if you haven't already. Everything I said in that first video is still the same except for the updates I've just given you for the second campaign. I'm not going to rehash everything I said in the first video. But just a real quick summary, in the 90s, my favorite writer, Jim Shooter, started a line of comics called Defiant. And Defiant put out some really original and interesting comic series. And those series were leading up to a crossover called Schism. But unfortunately, the line was canceled before it got published. All the issues were drawn, but unfortunately, none of the issues in the 4-issue miniseries were published. Schism is the epic conclusion of the origin of Defiant Comics, but it's also an excellent jumping on point for new readers. So if you've never read Defiant Comics before, you can still read Schism and enjoy it. But if you do want to get some Defiant Comics and read up on those, feel free to check out my guide to Defiant Comics. So fans managed to hunt down and find every single page of Schism, which was 4 double-sized issues for 160 pages. And so some of them were original pages, some of them were photocopies or images of pages. And so they've gathered them all, and they are raising money to restore them, color them, script them, letter them, and print them. And the level of support has been extraordinary. The first Kickstarter raised over $20,000. At its height, it got almost to $40,000, which is amazing for a first-time Kickstarter for a series that wasn't published 30 years ago. I mean, this is a line of comics that lasted like a year and a half. So this is an extraordinary amount of support. Any Kickstarter would be ecstatic to raise that much money. So what happened? The goal of the Kickstarter was $60,000, which of course turned out to be way too high. And unfortunately, Kickstarter does not allow a campaign's goal to be changed once that campaign begins. So this Kickstarter is not being done by someone who has a background in comics or Kickstarting. It's being done by a fan, Jake Weaver, and he has a podcast called Midnight on Earth. It's not a comics podcast, but he's such a Defiant Comics fan that he had Jim Shooter on twice for 2 very long, very good interviews I recommend listening to. He's also the moderator of the Defiant Comics fan Facebook group, which is the group that helped get all these pages together for this project. Jake may not have a background creating comics, but he is consulting with people who do, including Zach Lynch, who was an intern at Defiant Comics. And Jake actually reunited Zach and Jim Shooter on air during his podcast. Zach is now doing Blue Shack Comics, and his stuff is very impressive over there. He's got a lot of very talented people putting out some great comics. And so they're using a colorist named Felipe, who's done some work from Blue Shack, to color the Schism pages. And they actually took the original Schism promotional art and had Felipe color it. And so I don't know if this poster is still available. It was available for orders for Blue Shack Comics, but this gives you kind of an idea of the quality of the work that we can expect. The artwork on the book was taken care of 30 years ago. It was drawn, all these artists were paid, and so the covers and the layouts were done by David Lapham, who did Plasm and of course would go on to do Stray Bullets, and the finishes and inks and all that stuff on the interiors were done by various artists in no particular order: J.G. Jones, Dave Taylor, Charlie Adlard, and Tim Hamilton. And I'm not sure how complete their knowledge is about who worked on Schism. So if you worked on this mini-series and I didn't mention your name, please contact Jake, because he's looking to kind of be as complete and thorough with the credits as possible. And of course, they are consulting with the original creators at Defiant Comics. Jim Shooter, who did the plot, will be story consultant. They're also consulting with Pauline Weiss, who was a former senior editor at Defiant Comics. And Janet Jackson, JJ, is best known as a colorist and a graphic designer, but she was also a writer at Jim Shooter's different companies in the 90s and did a lot of good work, and she is going to be doing the script. And so Jake has got the comic side of this thing covered, and that's the most important part. The Kickstarter is a little complicated, like I said. No one comes out of the womb knowing how to do a Kickstarter, and I think it's very understandable that he is having to start again. So in an ideal world, yes, a Kickstarter like this would be run by an industry veteran, David Lapham or somebody like that. But that's really not the way these projects work. I have been a part of the Valiant/Defiant/Broadway fan community off and on for decades. These types of projects to publish and preserve old stuff from these companies is always done by the fans. And it can get a little bumpy sometimes, but it gets done. And this is clearly the biggest and most expensive project like this that has ever been done, the most ambitious. But we have clearly shown the support is there to get it done. If you guys just come back and pledge, we can get this done. We can get Schism published. We can make our dreams come true. And so I don't feel like I'm the most qualified person to pitch Schism to you. So I'm going to end with the words of someone who is, Jim Shooter from back in the 90s.
The thing happening story-wise in Defiant Universe is we're building towards our first sort of major crossover, and it's called Schism. And basically this is sort of the end of the origin of the universe. The main story of the crossover is going to take place in 4 graphic novel size books, and separate from the regular monthly books. All the monthly books will lead up to these, and all the monthly books will continue after them. But we're going to make it intelligible so that if you don't want to spring for the books, or if you don't think it's worth it, you're not, quote, forced to. So that's, but I think this is such a significant event that no one is interested in our books is going to want to miss it. Really came up with something I think that has never been done before, and probably won't ever be done again.